Hi, this is E.T. Are you one of those I love science people? Well, E.T. is not. He does have, however, a respect for research findings, assuming they're conducted by researchers already knowledgeable of the subject being studied and attempting to ferret out the truth and not promote deceptions that may be favorable to their sponsors or patrons. These gentlemen here are Dr. James Mossman, who works at Brown University in Rhode Island, and Professor Alan Pesce. He teaches in England at the University of Sheffield. He's a senior lecturer in something called andrology that deals with men's diseases. Both caused a ruckus and were apparently themselves surprised when they revealed to a BBC interviewer startling news that men who take anabolic steroids dramatically reduce, and in some cases permanently reduce, their ability to produce sperm, and thus their ability to reproduce and transmit genes. That's a packet of instructions tucked into the DNA. Also, startling to these researchers is that at this late date, 70 years after the production of synthetic steroids in Europe, that all this is news. The fact is, testicle shrinkage and subsequent sperm reduction has been known about for at least since the release of Dianabol in the U.S., and that was in the early 1960s. And it's something that's been reported on television and in documentaries, some of which were shown on the BBC. And some of those documentaries were about such men as Dorian Yates, a former Mr. Olympia and a resident of England who has been very candid regarding the drug's many effects on him and others, including but not limited to sterility. Well, also startling to these scientists is that a drug that saturates the body with a hormone would turn off the natural production of that hormone, when common sense would tell anybody that that's exactly what would happen. Had Dr. Mossman and Professor Pesce spent less time in the laboratory and more in the gym, then they'd not be surprised that a good number of athletes, especially at the top level, and gym rat bodybuilders take these drugs, or that these same men would lose their ability to reproduce and thus pass on their genes. Dr. Mossman speaks as though he just discovered some new element when he says something that, well, most anybody would already know, and I'm quoting Mossman. I noticed that some men coming in to have their fertility tested, and these guys were huge. They're trying to look really big, to look like the pinnacle of evolution, but they're making themselves very unfit in an evolutionary sense because, without exception, they had no sperm in their ejaculation at all. Well, he's talking like this is some new finding, when in fact infertility problems and a complete loss of sexual desire have been a common topic for decades. You don't need Professor Pesce's PhD to pick up on the implications of anabolic steroids on any future generation. Competitive bodybuilders, those who have lived long enough to talk about it, have spoken for years in words that may be less authoritative but are based on first-hand experience about what Professor Pesce seems to think is a revelation. Pesce says, and I quote, "More anabolic steroid users are likely to become sterile than you would think, 90% probably." Too often, scientists and researchers, in particular in fields related to fitness and nutrition, set up protocols for their research without first establishing some familiarity with whatever nutrient activity or whatever that has apparently generated enough anecdotal reports to justify their initial thesis in the first place. One doctor, not a researcher, but a compiler of research, Dr. Michael Greger, is an example. He posted videos lamenting the absence of fiber, soluble and insoluble, in vegetable and fruit juices. Well, that's a revelation that came as a shock to owners of juice extractors, juicers, such as this model here, the Omega 8000 model, when everybody who does juicing knows that a lot of fiber is left in very small pieces in the juices. Greger apparently was speaking of the bottled, pasteurized store juices, and he's apparently never used, or maybe is being less than candid about, juices extracted from fresh fruits and vegetables. The point here, my friends, is this: science is but a tool. It is effective either as a revealer of truth and useful knowledge, or a means to deceive and confuse. So, before spouting off regarding this or that particular study, pro or con, examine the protocols that were set up. Look at the researchers' credentials, their previous familiarity with the subject being looked at, and most important of all, look for any financial or other relationships with organizations or individuals that have an interest in the outcome of the research. This is E.T. Do you agree or disagree? Put your comments below. Thank you for watching. Hit the like or dislike button. Do subscribe. And if you do, hit the bell at the top right of this video. Promote these videos if you would. Thank you.